because I want to connect some of these things. I want to connect what Sam's saying. I want to connect the story that Katie was telling. I want to connect this piece of history and what happened 100 years ago tomorrow to where we are right now. And within this next few minutes, I'm also going to link together the Tulsa Massacre, the current debate that we're hearing about critical race theory, and the 8th principle that we're going to be voting on June 13th. Hang on and follow me. I promise it's going to all get thread together. I want you to see how much history repeats itself and how we are at a turning point to make a difference. We have to be. The Tulsa Black Wall Street community of Greenwood was an economically self-sustaining, culturally thriving part of town. To be clear, one oppressed population was built at the expense of another. Blacks were offered the chance to build their own cities in Oklahoma after the Civil War by taking away land that belonged to the native indigenous people who had already resided there, disregarding many of their already unfair existing treaties. So many layers of oppression in just that one sentence. The success of Greenwood was so threatening to the white people of Tulsa that they came in and destroyed it all 35 city blocks. Imagine 35 city blocks of Phoenix, how big that is. White rioters looted and burned down all of that. Within 24 hours, the National Guard had arrived, and instead of helping those who were attacked, injured, killed, they had imprisoned all Black Tulsans who were not already interned. Over 6,000 people were held at the convention center, some for as long as 8 days. As the city lay in charred ruins, more than 800 people were treated for injuries, and as many as 300 people died. The full number will never be known because the bodies were collected and thrown into a mass grave. This is all so much to hold on to, so much to reckon with. And it was 100 years ago. And for some, that may seem like a long time, but is it really? Is it really? Because many of us have family members that we knew were alive 100 years ago. How many generations ago was 100 years ago for you? It's just 2 generations for me. And yet, if you didn't live in Tulsa, you probably didn't know about the Tulsa Massacre until recently, if at all. Critical race theory has been around for over 50 years. Critical race theory seeks to examine the law as it intersects with issues of race. So critical race theory basically came out and said we need to look at social and cultural and legal issues through the lens of race and racism. It is loosely unified by a couple different themes. First, that white supremacy with its societal or structural racism exists. We agree that it exists, right? And it maintains power through the legal system and other power structures. We see that. We see that through our prison system, through our justice system. We see it in our policing systems. Also, second, that it is possible to transform the relationship between law and racial power, and that it's worth working towards. So this is the second part of it, is that we believe that we can do better. We can transform our systems because racial emancipation and anti-subordination liberates us all. So there it is, critical race theory. 1, racism exists and it works through our structures, and 2, we can do better. Now, the fact that critical race theory, something that was introduced in the 70s, has been accepted as an incontrovertible truth is kind of the underpinning in all of our justice work, and is the lived experience of Black and brown people. It's under attack right now because conservative folks are uncomfortable with it. The fact that it's under attack is not a coincidence. And it's not happening in other places. On Thursday, yes, that was 4 days ago, our Arizona state legislature defeated a bill banning discussion of critical race theory or its principles in schools. Was it defeated because the idea of wiping this idea out is baloney and sets us back in our history half a decade? No, of course not. There's lots of people who want to ban the idea of critical race theory. No, it was defeated because several Republicans believed that it would make our teacher shortage worse, not because it was wrong. The critics of critical race theory have attacked this. First of all, they're still calling it a theory, which makes them want to attack it. And that most of us have accepted as a fact and as a way of life to attack the focus on race in our country. This is not a coincidence that we're seeing it with the uprising of Black and brown people and their white allies after the tragic death of George Floyd just 1 year ago last week. They've seen the protests. They've seen the fact that more and more white people are waking up to the systemic oppression that Black people face, and the fact that our systems, our policing, our justice, our legislative systems are not working equally for our siblings of color. They're scared. They're feeling threatened. They're worrying about the changing of the status quo and what might happen if they lose the power that they clearly hold right now. They're saying things like, that was in the past. Why do we have to think about it? Why are we always so negative? Those are the underpinnings of racism. And this is exactly what happened 100 years ago. Black people in Greenwood were rising in power, in wealth, and in influence. And central to this, they knew that this was threatening, and they were willing to stand up for their community and fight. Key to what happened in Greenwood was that our Black folks there were willing to stand up and fight. Although they were outnumbered, they were committed not to back down. Although they had fewer guns, they were still committed. And although not a single penny in damages or restitution was ever given to them, not a single penny, insurance, nothing, they rebuilt their city anyways. So both of these stories, the story of the people of Greenwood who were brutally attacked and who were attempted to be erased, and the story of the uprising after George Floyd's murder, of the folks who rose up to protest and who were arrested and attacked, and there now critical race theory is being banned in schools, they rely on the same thing. White people in power feeling threatened and fighting back, and Black people and their white allies saying, no, we will not forget history and we will not back down. 100 years ago, as our country was at a turning point, we could have looked at this travesty and changed our course. And we, I'm meaning a very, very big we here, but we didn't. Instead, the town of Tulsa immediately, as in like the next day immediately, started blaming the Black folks, tried to erase the town of Greenwood, and never paid the restitution. And then they tried to bury the history so we wouldn't be able to look at it critically and call it what it was, abhorrent. Now, 100 years ago, we are at another turning point. We can look at the race revolution of 2020 and change our course. Those in power want to make sure that we don't. They imprisoned the protesters, calling them looters and criminals. The cause they are fighting for, which is changing those systems of oppression that are inherent in our laws and our structures, is trying to be erased by banning critical race theory. They are also trying to bury the realities that our siblings are telling us are true. They're trying to tell us their life story. And trying to bury that is also abhorrent. So here we are at the turning point. What are we going to do? Are we going to allow them to sweep our history under the rug? No. Are we going to allow them to convince us that the victims were to blame? No. Are we going to do harm and not institute? No. Are we going to continue to make people feel uncomfortable by talking about our history, our current realities, our race challenges? Yes. And are we going to hold people accountable for their actions? Yes. We truly hope that the strength and courage of our Black folks, which, just to be clear, has always been there, and the strong reclaiming of their heritage, power, and rights will not result in another massacre. But we need to be realistic that the powerful have never given up their power willingly. It cannot be wished away or convinced away or taken away with logic or asking nicely. It must be claimed strongly over and over again that what is happening is wrong and we won't take it anymore. So this brings it to the 8th principle. In 3 short weeks, this congregation is going to vote on whether fighting racism is central enough to us as a faith community that we are willing to enshrine it as one of our principles, along with respect for the earth, the free search for truth and meaning, and respecting the democratic process, among others. We are asking our congregation to affirm that our collective liberation through the eradication of systems of oppression is central to who we are. So that's my question to you. Is it central to who we are? Is it? Yes, these are just words. No, they will not change everything, but make no mistake, words do matter. And collectively, they matter a lot. In the last 3 years, 61 congregations have adopted the 8th principle, and up to 20 more are adopting it this year through their congregational meetings, including us. And our denomination is looking at all of our principles right now as they are charged to do every decade or so. Our collective voice on this matter is being noticed within the denomination. In case you think that this racism stuff happens everywhere else and not in our Unitarian Universalist faith, you are mistaken. Some of those who are noticing this talking more about race are white people who do not want our denomination focused on fighting racism. They are resorting to some of the same tactics that our lawmakers are, retelling our history in a new way to blame the victims, looking to ban certain words and concepts like white supremacy, telling lies and mistruths, and even there is a contesting of the upcoming election of our denomination's board to grab some of the power for themselves. Yes, this is in our own beloved Unitarian Universalist denomination. There's not a lot of people, but they are very threatened, and they are very disruptive, and they are very loud, and they are exhausting for those of us who are fighting against racism. And that's what they mean to do. We're spending time fighting them instead of doing the work that we want to be doing outside. It is also abhorrent. This is our moment in history. So do we let history be swept under the rug and let the alternative narrative get traction? Or do we stand up with our words and make our commitment out loud? Our Black siblings who have been fighting for their place in our denomination are urgently asking us to make this statement. This is our opportunity to do so. I do hope that you will vote in favor of adopting the 8th principle at our congregational meeting on June 13th. And this is not me saying that as you need to do this as your minister. This is me asking as a person who is dedicated to this cause asking you to join me in that and join all of us. 100 years ago, an entire town was decimated because our Black siblings were gaining power and self-determination. This past year, Black people were arrested for protesting about their own protection and self-determination. Today, and each day we draw breath, we have the choice to deny what is happening, demonize the victims, and sweep history under the rug, or to stand on the side of love, liberation, and equality. 100 years ago, the powers that be in Tulsa made the wrong decision. 100 years later, we stand here now at a turning point. We can choose what we want our story to be going forward. I hope and I pray that we choose liberation. I hope we choose equality. I hope and I pray that we choose love. We close with a song about the need to keep telling these stories.